Do you suffer from debilitating migraines? You know, that throbbing pain in the front or side of your head that's so severe you're unable to work or do anything other than retreat into a dark and quiet room? Have you had them for years and just haven't found a solution? Call Dr. Elizabeth Ebersol and put an end to your debilitating migraines forever. Or go to her website at www.handmadehealth.com. That's www.handmadehealth.com.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Balls to the Wall podcast, our episode 0. So what we're going to be doing here is just laying the groundwork, introducing everyone to, just who we are, what we do, and why this podcast came together. We have a lot of topics that we think would be pretty interesting to our audience and our viewers. So hopefully you guys can be the groundwork for that as well. I want to go ahead and introduce our two other co-hosts, Kenny Matthews of Friday Night Glory and Billy Martin Jr. How's it going today, guys?
Doing great, man. I'm really excited about this, man. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun.
We'll go ahead and start with Kenny. Kenny, just go ahead, explain, what you do, who you are, why you're here.
Well, I started with Randy Edwards 10 years ago. We kind of started this FridayNightGlory.com deal here where we covered high school sports, and I was one of the original 7. I think there's only 3 of us left now. But, it was a great concept. I was always going to high school football games anyway. I was watching and, being on a lot of sidelines, knew a lot of coaches that, get me a sideline pass. It was kind of nice. I always tell myself now, I used to actually just watch the game. I didn't have to cover the game. It was kind of different, but we kind of involved with that. And so we kind of just watched that little baby just kind of get bigger and bigger and bigger as we came through. And we've had a few fair interns come through, one or two that went on and blossomed later, so we started that company and it's been really fun. I mean, it kept me in the sports loop. That was something that I was missing. I went to North Texas. I studied speech and communications. I thought I was going to be the next Bryant Gumbel. Meanwhile, my junior year, I came here and started working with my father in the investment world, and I never got to scratch that, itch that I had. So some 30 years later, I was able to do that. So I tell the people now, I said, you never know, if you can get that dream back. I said, it took me a little over a quarter of a century to get there, but now I'm here, man, and I'm just, I'm all in now. So it's kind of fun. It really is. But I'm really looking forward to this. It's going to be nice for us to kind of just talk about current events and talk about, sporting events with you guys. And I mean, I have the utmost respect for you guys with your sports knowledge and what you can bring. So it's going to be challenging, in a way, because it's going to be nice. We got to bring that A game every week. So that's going to be fun.
For sure. And what's always impressed me about you, Kenny, is that you're really personable and you relate to a lot of different walks of life. Whenever you're out, in the field, whether, doing in your day job and your career investment or, out doing Friday Night Glory things, how are you able to, kind of relate with, people that, whether it be a 14-year-old kid as a freshman in high school or, maybe someone a little bit older, like in their 60s or 70s? What do you find, the challenges of that and the pros of that as well?
That's an excellent question. And I think it really comes down to being is just trying to get people to feel comfortable with you, in a sense of ease. That's really what it is. If the person's nervous, you shoot them softballs, you reassure them, you can maybe answer a question that's really easy for them. So they kind of get, feeling better. Then you can kind of get a little bit more as you go. With older people, what we've really found out is they just need to know if you're genuine or not. Older people now, as you get older, you kind of get that misguided trust a little bit. You've been burnt a few times, as I could say, going on. So they just want to know if you're genuine and honest with them. And I think that that's the biggest thing, that one of my strengths is being able to, like you said, relate to elders, since we've had so many in our business. I've actually watched them grow up into their 80s or 90s, whatever may be the case. And then with the younger people, I think it's just a matter of just saying, hey, it's okay to make a mistake. But I'll help you go through it, kind of be that uncle, the big brother, that guy that comes in. So I think that's been the biggest key for me to be able to relate with both of those kind of genres.
Going to our other co-host, Billy Martin Jr. Billy, explain who you are, what you do, and why you're here.
Well, so going back to our mutual friend, Randy, he and I were college mates back in the 80s at Texas Tech University. After college, I got into sports television. My father, who was obviously Billy Martin, the baseball legend, passed away right after I graduated college. So I kind of thought my dream of being a baseball agent died with him, and started working in television, but slowly started a baseball agency with one of my oldest friends. And we've been doing that for the past couple decades and a half, and represent players all the way from the minor leagues to the major leagues. And, I've done some color analyzations of baseball games, been involved in independent league baseball as a manager, as a player personnel director, but mainly as an agent. And I love all sports.
Yeah, absolutely. And my biggest thing that I've only known you briefly. We've probably only known each other for about a month, all three of us here. But what's impressed me so far with you is that you seem to be handling a lot of tasks pretty well. So what would you say is, the challenges in that, and how you've been able to do that pretty well?
I don't necessarily know I'm handling as well as you think I am, but I appreciate that support. I'm a multitasker. Obviously, you have to be in this business, especially with COVID in the last couple of years. And it's a unique world. There's no mold. There's no cookie cutter way to do any of this stuff. The people who think outside the box, I think, create the most dynamic ways of doing things. And I want to try to accomplish that. I want us to do that with this show.
Yeah, absolutely. And just kind of coming over, to what I do. I'm a reporter for 24/7 Sports, mainly focusing on Texas Longhorns basketball and football recruiting. But in the same sense, I'm pretty much covering a lot of sports throughout the state, throughout the year, whether that be on the high school or college front. So I'm meeting a lot of people throughout the year, covering a lot of events, doing a lot of things. And I actually started with Friday Night Glory and with Kenny way back in the day, I guess like 5 years ago, when I was in high school. So it's definitely been a fun journey thus far. And this is definitely something that really interested me when our mutual friend Randy Edwards came to me about it and said, "Hey, let's do this podcast, and let's get three people that are pretty relatively kind of do different things in some senses, and maybe would have three completely different perspectives, and can join them to talk about whether it be current events or where our groundwork has started in sports." So I'm really excited to be able to do those things and being able to engage with our audience in the future. And also in the future, we won't always be on Zoom here. We have a studio in the works that will hopefully we will have ready for our first actual episode. But here, episode 0 again, just kind of laying the groundwork. But I think something else that I really wanted to do here in this episode 0 is being able to ask questions about what each other do. So maybe if you have like 2 or 3 questions, each of you, about what either I do or what Kenny does or what Billy does, I think that would be a really good starting point for helping everyone else understand kind of where we're at. So I'll go ahead and let Kenny start.
Well, I'd like to say one other thing about Nick Harris. The one thing I knew about him when he was a sophomore, that first time we met, he had that it factor. I mean, at that young of an age, he was gun ho, he took notes, and you could see there was something there. And I remember when I dropped you off at Randy and he took you home that day, and Randy called me on the way back. I said, "Man, that guy's got a bright future, and what you have done in such a short time, the name recognition that you've done and the hard work." Now, don't get me wrong, you've put in the work. You have put in the work. You have hustled since day one. But man, what you've done and blossomed into, man, I am just so completely proud of you, man. I know the journey is just starting for you, but man, the future's big time bright for you, and you're in a destination that you want to be at. As a junior in college, that's pretty good, man, to have that kind of mapped out for you so early, man. So, man, you just keep doing that work, man. I know you won't toot your own horn, but I wanted to have a forum to do that for you, man.
Absolutely. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
And did you have any maybe other questions about, whether what Billy does or, what I do or, just kind of things in general?
Well, the intrigue is that I met Billy a few years back, and then he was doing some things for the Air Hogs here, local team, local independent team here, and we had a couple of Friday night interns that came over that way. Malik Wright and Cameron Bean came over, and it was nice to see that Billy Martin Jr. was still in the game. I mean, I knew he was an agent, but I knew that he was also doing some broadcasting and doing some technical things over there. So maybe Billy, you could talk a little bit about that, kind of splitting duties, I guess, in a way.
Well, baseball is one of those games that, for me, although they're trying to change it like crazy with 7-inning game doubleheaders and starting guys at second base, but before that, it was a transitional game that your grandfather took you to when you were a little guy, and for many years it was called America's pastime, and I think that's why. I think it's been around so long and was so generational that but who knows, in today's world of changes and things moving as quickly as they do, I know they're always trying to change the game. I kind of hate that personally. I wish they would dial it back a little bit, but hey, we'll charge on through the fog.
That kind of leads into my question that I have for Billy is, so what is the solution? Because, Rob Manfred and the rest of the MLB and just baseball fans want to make the game a little bit more appealing to a younger audience. How do you combine that with, keeping baseball, keeping the roots of baseball still aligned? Because I agree with you, putting a runner on second base in the extra innings and 7-inning doubleheaders are not the way to do it. So what would you think is the solution as someone who's, really tuned in with those kind of things?
Well, I think one of the things we need to dial into are what things have mutated over the years. One of the things Manfred just did that flies all over me, he took away the World Series MVP award. Used to be named the Babe Ruth Award, and now it's become the Willie Mays Award. And I don't understand that, because Babe Ruth really was the best World Series player in history. He was one of the best hitters, but he's absolutely, bar none, the best pitcher in World Series history. We're talking about a guy that pitched a 14-inning game victory in the World Series, pitched all 14 innings and won 2-1. And, got a few knocks in that game too. But today's pitcher obviously isn't going to pitch 14 innings. And so, all these pitching changes are one of the things that really slow down the pace of the game. And I think that's an area they really have to focus on. How many pitching changes can go down, and how much time each pitcher gets to warm up, and all that stuff, because that to me is the biggest bog down that we get. Otherwise, I don't really worry about a ton of the other stuff. It is a slower paced game. That's why you have silly things going on between innings and dot races and things like that.
Yeah.
You show highlights. You get the fans involved in other ways. But I think part of that pace is, in a way, part of the beauty of the game. I just think it really needs to stay generational. And I think they need to have in every ballpark an area where people can sit down and afford to go to a game. A game should be like going to a movie. That's the way baseball was forever.
Yeah.
Your grandpa could afford to take you there. To take a family of 4 to a Major League Baseball game now is a car payment.
Yeah.
At the old stadium, you could sit in the bleachers for $2.
Well,
$2.
Considering how bad the Rangers are these days, that might still be the case. But we get off the point. I was sitting at the Big 12 tournament in Oklahoma City at the end of May, and this kind of leads into what you were saying, Billy, about pitching changes and limiting those kind of things. I was sitting there and I was talking to my friend next to me, Guy Frazier, that Kenny knows pretty well. And I was like, what do you think about this? If a pitcher starts the inning, he has to finish it. That kind of eliminates, not only like situational pitching and stuff like that, but also just making the game a little bit, quicker. Unless obviously there's an injury or something, then that would be a different case. But what do you think about that? What do each of you think about that?
I don't have a problem with that, except for there has to be a pitch count limit, because injuries are going to happen if a guy has to throw too many pitches in one inning. So, maybe that's 35, 40 pitches. You're flirting with injury then, because although that doesn't sound like much, at one time in that kind of stress, it's really dangerous. And I'd love to ask my friend Tom House or some real pitching gurus what they think about that. But you might be onto that, or is it just that you can only make 3 changes per game? But then we're always going to have that danger factor that we have to come up with amendments for. So, it's not an easy answer. It really isn't.
Yeah, because baseball is so structured in a way. So being able to add just more structure to that, I think would make things really complicated. So that is the challenge, and I understand that.
I do like your proposal there, Dick, though. I think you got some merit to it, because I do think that the stoppage of the manager going out, the pitching coach going out first, and the manager going out to take him out, then revolving 2 or 3 or 4 relievers in an inning, that does slow the pace. I mean, it really does. It kills any momentum that maybe the viewer has. Now, I'm not talking about the players itself or the game itself, but from a viewing standpoint, yes, it kills it. And I'm not sure if that is the complete answer. I think there's a happy medium between what you and Billy are saying. Maybe there needs to be a pitch count. If you reach a threshold, can't throw 50 or 60 pitches. That guy can't pitch for a week then. You can't do that. But I think that there might be a happy medium there, because we've got to pick up the pace with that. And I think we also got to pick up the pace with the batter in the batter's box. That's the other thing. On every pitch, the batter steps out, takes, does his batting gloves, whatever, the whole routine. That slows everything down. Do that the first time you get in the batter's box, and then be done with it. If you look at some old films, guys didn't get out of the box.
Yeah.
You would see a strike or a ball, they may put their hand in the dirt, but they put that bat right back on the shoulder, because they knew the pitcher was coming 10 seconds later with another pitch.
And that's another thing that was baseball in the sense. Like, could you imagine if a receiver in football, caught a 30-yard pass, is like, hold on, let me retie my shoes real quick. It's just that's the only thing that happens in baseball. So I understand that. I like that as well.
Well, another thing to look at there too is, I promise you, if you stepped out of the box 2 or 3 times against Bob Gibson, you were probably going to wear one. There was one coming at your ear hole, and so there's players used to police a lot of these problems themselves.
Absolutely.
And too many people, I think, got involved in that. And I mean, recently a player was thrown out after hitting Acuna with the first pitch of the game, and it was a breaking ball. So you're not, if you're hitting a guy on purpose, you're not hitting him with the breaking ball.
No.
So that pitcher was kicked out of the game, and that's a joke. I mean, that was not intentional. But let's let some of these things get flushed out on the field, because I promise you the players will take care of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Billy, you've had something pretty busy happen in the last couple of weeks, the MLB draft. Walk me through that process, how that was for you in those 3 days.
Well, and this draft was as crazy a draft as I've ever seen, because think about this. 2 years ago, the draft was 40 rounds. Last year, because of COVID, they made it a 5-round draft. So there were 35 rounds of undrafted players rolling over into this year's 20-round draft. So you have those 35 plus the other 20 that didn't get included in this draft. So you're trying to condense, 75 rounds into 20 of players. There was that much talent out there. And so it was unique. There were a lot of people, I'm sure, that thought they were going to get drafted who did not. It's an interesting process because you have to do your homework on each client. You have to talk to them about so many things. I had several clients who did not get drafted who would have had they agreed to sign for an amount that might be a big deal to some people. But I had guys that turned down $250,000 plus free college. One to go to your school, Nick, to go to the University of Texas. And he thinks he's got a chance to be one of their weekend starters and really put his name on the map next year for the draft, coming from a more obscure junior college in an, not as highly scouted area.
Yeah.
So this was a very, very unique draft, but each one is so different. Each kid's situation is so different. Our firm had 3 fourth-rounders. One who got much more than the slot allowed, one who got exactly what the slot allowed, and one who got less than the slot allowed. And each one's circumstances are so different. I'd like to say we did a great job for all 3 of them, even though if you look at them individually, you might say, oh, well, why did this guy sign for less? Yeah. Well, because we felt that he was going a couple rounds later and cut a deal with the team to overdraft him, underpay him a little bit, but he actually got more money than he would have gotten where we had him going.
So there's a lot of ins and outs with those kinds of things for sure.
Oh, yeah. And, other agents will point fingers at that later, but my client and I know what the truth is.
Yeah, for sure. And the constantly evolving landscape of MILB, the minor league system, even before COVID, it was kind of starting to happen, conversations as far as, how is this going to be in the future? And I think COVID kind of accelerated that. I think you'd be able to speak more on that, but there's a considerable amount of teams that are just getting nixed, basically. So who suffers the most? Obviously, you would think it would be the, career minor league guy who maybe only gets called up 2 or 3 times in his career for, a couple games. But is that the case?
Well, and is that guy really suffering? Because in a way, you're doing him a favor, right? You're maybe sending him on to the next phase in his life where he probably needs to go if he's truly a 4A guy, meaning that back and forth AAA guy. Unless he's got a chance to get 4 full years of service time, he's probably doesn't have a chance at a pension.
Yeah.
And maybe needs to move on, but who knows? That's the inevitable part of baseball that's so tricky, because one little adjustment on a pitch, one little finger pressure here might mean the difference in 3 feet of movement on a fastball or break on a breaking ball or changeup. One slight adjustment with your launch angle might turn a singles hitter into a home run hitter. And so a lot of these guys believe that, they're going to figure that out and make that adjustment, because anybody who gets drafted and gets in the game has the ability to play it. Yeah. It really breaks down to me on what's between those ears. Those are the analytics. nobody can figure out in baseball. And if somebody figures that out, they'll win a lot of games.
Yeah, for sure. And whenever we're evaluating quarterbacks, I can kind of relate to that because the biggest trait in evaluating quarterbacks is how they are between the ears. And it's hard to do. It's the hardest position in sports to evaluate, in my opinion. So I understand that in a lot of sense. And baseball is a big time mind game as well, because, when you get in those slumps, it takes, a lot between the ears to get over those. But kind of going back to, COVID really affecting sports over the past, 18 months or whatever it's been. We've seen that change things in every single sport in the country. The Olympics are in the air right now because, so many countries are, not at resourceful with, the vaccine and whatnot. So, people are going to this Olympic Village and already catching cases. So we're already still seeing it. But Kenny, what have you been able to see, from the high school perspective last season? I know the UIL, the governing body for high school football in the state of Texas this past weekend, said that they were able to play, 80% of the games this past season. But what have you been able to see, from the ground, how it's kind of affected kids, how it's affected the recruiting landscape and things like that?
Well, Nick, I'm glad you kind of brought that up because I remember about this time last year, Brian Gosson and I were talking. He's worked for Fort Worth Star Telegram here and covers high school sports. And he was on a Zoom meeting with UIL about the upcoming year last year, what, the protocol is going to be and everything. And at that time, it was trying to decipher if they were going to move the spring sports to the fall and the fall football to the spring. That was a big push last July, about doing that. State of California ended up doing that.
Yeah.
So it was a big push. And I was very pessimistic. I thought there was no way we were going to be able to do it. Things were surging. I said, the way that things were going, I said, we got football players breathing on top of each other. How are we not going to be transmitting this disease from, game to game practice? And it only takes is just one person to be affected, for that to spread amongst the group. Now, if you and I both know, Nick, last year, man, for the first 6 weeks, man, games are getting canceled left and right last year. And it seemed like it kind of settled down about November. I think people started kind of buying into the protocols, doing what they needed to do, especially the teams that had a lot to lose. The teams that were good, they were saying, hey, you guys need to go and be around people that are, your family members or us. And I also thought that the big key was that a lot of the student athletes were able to stay at home and do their homeschooling. They weren't in the public school environment being around, the masses that could be around there. Now, this year, I understand you have that option, but some schools are not giving you that option. So that's going to be kind of a delicate deal here, especially with the Delta variant. It's running rapid right now. I think we could still get around it. I think as more and more people get vaccinated, that's going to help also. I read a stat the other day, it was about 56% or something like that in the state of Texas. People, have 2 shots in the arm now, at least by now. And then now that you made it 12 and over to get the shots, I think you're going to see a push because of what happened to NC State in the College World Series this last year. Not being able to compete, because, you caught the COVID. You don't want to be that guy that gets COVID week 12, and 20 or 25 of your best players or just players on your team are sick with it. I think maybe just by guilt alone, some people that are on that fence are going to get it or feel pressure from maybe some upperclassmen, to say, hey, you better get this second shot. So I think we're not going to have as many issues, I guess, make a long story short. I don't think we'll have as many issues this year, but I still think that in the opening weeks, we're probably going to have some of that because, look at everything's rising, across the board, every state last week, rising cases on this. So we're not going to be immune to that. We're in one of the largest states in the country. So it's going to happen again, unfortunately, but hopefully we learn more and hopefully people will be more educated just to go on and get their shots. Take that off of take that excuse. As Michael Irvin said yesterday, take that off of one of the reasons why you don't succeed is COVID. Just get your vaccination.
Yeah. I brought up the point about kids being homeschooled this past year and being able, to have that hybrid education. And something that really surprised me with that is that it has made some athletes who, have a really good, work ethic a lot better. I remember seeing some kids go into that quarantine looking like kids and coming out of that quarantine looking like men. And I don't know if Billy's been able to see the same thing on the baseball side of things, but on the football and basketball side of things, it's certainly, you know, the kids that worked really hard, you know, they came out and did that thing. But we have about less than a minute left here on the show today, but I definitely just wanted to lay the groundwork today of, you know, the Balls to the Wall podcast, and, you know, get us all, you know, kind of churning and talking about important things. But I appreciate you guys for being here, and, you know, we'll have a really good setup for our first episode, and hopefully that'll be in person. But until then, thank you, Kenny, thank you, Billy, and until next time, I'm Eric.